Hey dear, Zinzi here, and I've been talking about a while now about how psyched I was to read Anatomy, a love story, and finally I've read it and it's taken me down this dark, morbidly fascinating rabbit hole of medical cadavers, body snatchers, and 19th century medicine, and I've been reading like a whole bunch of other related nonfiction and other books that kind of fit within this vein. So I want to share all that with you, and if you're morbidly fascinated too, then tune in. But first, I do want to give some historical context for the time period where these books took place. So during the 19th century, surgery isn't what it is like now. They were spectacles, they're operating theaters, and since the little artery clamps weren't invented yet, doctors had to work extremely quickly, like they had to perform surgeries within minutes so that the patient didn't bleed out. And even if the patient survived surgery, hygiene was so poor, sometimes they just died of infection anyway. Also during that time period, legal medical cadavers were in short supply, so medical schools and anatomists would resort to less savory means. They would employ the help of body snatchers, aka resurrection men, and they would go out and scope out funerals and like dig up freshly dug graves, or they would sometimes impersonate a loved one and go to a poor house and take the body that way. So this is essentially the backdrop for the two books that I'm going to be mainly discussing today. Starting off with Anatomy, a Love Story by Dana Swartz. This story centers around Hazel, who is the daughter of a viscount, and she's betrothed to her cousin, but she doesn't want to just be a boring old society lady. She wants to become a surgeon, so she secretly enlists the help of a resurrectionist man named Jack, and together they snatch bodies for her to study. However, as they're like collecting bodies, they start to realize that some of them are already missing body parts, so they try to unravel this mystery. And at first glance, this book seemed so up my alley for the premise, and I wanted so desperately to love it, but I ended up with a lot of mixed feelings I'll get into. I'll start with the good. So I loved the body horror and the gruesome, gory surgery details. I love that. It's like, ooh, it's gross in a good way. And I also felt like it was pretty much historically accurate, since the author herself is a history podcaster. And now I'll get into the parts I didn't love so much. I think my major issue was with the pacing. So it takes about half of the novel for the two main characters, Jack and Hazel, to actually meet. Like for the first part, it's her like dealing with the pressures of being a societal woman, and then even though it's like split in between two different narratives of Jack and Hazel, I feel like Hazel's narrative as this sheltered, privileged lady overshadows everything else, and we don't get as much of the back alley underbelly of the body snatchers from Jack's perspective, which I would have loved. And even though it's like called a love story and is marketed as a romance, there's like maybe one romance scene I liked regarding I don't want to spoil it, but it would do Mary Shelley proud. I'll just say that in a graveyard. So that was fantastic, but I just didn't get as much build up between the two main characters because they don't meet for the first half of the book, and I feel like there's so many subplots, like there's a fever going on, that it's not like fully developed and adequately addressed for the final portion of the book. So it was a little bit of a letdown. I don't know if it's this weird first book syndrome, since it's apparently getting a sequel, so if it was meant to be a setup novel, it feels more like an introduction for most of it. So that might have been what I had issues with here. So to sum things up, amazing premise. I feel like it was half-baked and underdeveloped though. Next we have The Corpse Queen, which follows Molly, who is an orphan who is adopted by her estranged aunt. However, her aunt turns out to be the notorious Corpse Queen, so her aunt asks her to earn her keep and to go on errands collecting medical specimens for her. However, while she's out on the job, she's noticing that the bodies are mutilated in the same way that she found her dead best friend Kitty. So she wants to track this serial killer down and get revenge. Yeah, so this is a really interesting historical thriller, and there are legitimately parts in the beginning where I was gasping in shock and laughing out loud because there is a lot of black humor in here. This book started off so strong to me. However, I feel like once we get to the middle, it starts losing focus. Like there's a lot of random, not very believable things that start happening, like with one of Molly's friends. She's a lady of the night, but she also works as a seamstress, and I don't think during those times someone would have both of those jobs. So some random subplots really took away from like the tension for me. So there you have it. Those are the fiction macabre books that I've read recently. I'm also currently reading The Knifeman, which is about the doctor that Dr. Jekyll and Hyde is based on. And that one's nonfiction, but it's still like absolutely riveting. But it's gross. Fair warning. But if you have any recommendations for books within that category, let me know down in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching. See ya!